Well, boys and girls, I think they're bullshitting us. GPT 5.2 is out, and while the benchmarks are up, everyone else is saying it's not much better. What are your thoughts? So in today's video, we're going to be jumping into this. I've been using it for a little while now, playing around with it. I figured I'd give you my thoughts, feelings, opinions. If you saw my last one, if you know anything about AI, I feel like the world of AI is becoming more and more sanitized and controlled. So if I say anything to start, I highly recommend all of you looking at having access to open source models, learning how to install it onto your device locally, and being able to have the freedom and control that you need, desire, and crave when it comes to having so much knowledge and available information at your fingertips and its ability to do things, right? What's unfortunate is these platforms, as you see here, look, across the board, it looks like it's getting better. But benchmarks are just that. They are benchmarks. It doesn't actually translate into reality all the time. Now, again, there's time and place for these benchmarks, but it's just like with the phone. You know, a new Apple fucking program comes out or new Apple phone comes out. Great. Doesn't mean it's actually worth buying or using. Maybe the older model actually is more efficient and more effective at what it is that we needed to do, rather than pushing out a new model that becomes more controlled, more sanitized, more blocked in a sense, reducing your ability to have the freedom and creativity or a third-party insight that you desire, right? So anyways, we got all these lovely benchmarks. I could go into them. Doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters to you. If it does, let me know. I was looking at this. Look, I 100% agree with this. GPT 5.2 is the proof that benchmarks cannot be trusted. 100% agree. Look, a benchmark is just that. It is a benchmark, but it doesn't mean that this benchmark is like gospel. It's not going to equate to every single one of your situations, especially when you're trying to run a business or you're trying to do your own personal endeavors, whatever those may be. You're not always going to be someone in the STEM category. And even then, you have to understand how to communicate to it, how to prompt it, how to follow up, the level of context and clarity that each prompt, or not prompt, but model needs. And it seems while you are able to give these platforms less context and get a result, inherently its ability to just handle detailed context and retain that information appropriately and have the level of the kind of response that you want, it just seems to be crumbling. It's like, yeah, you gave me a response, but 90% of it seems to be BS, right? Look at this. This is another piece. Look, there is a lot here. So with the release of GPT 5.2, it feels as if we returned overnight to when GPT first launched. But despite dominating benchmarks, the model's lack of basic comprehension and perception has led to baffling performance in everyday use cases and human to AI interactions. Following two use cases just show how absurd the help can be when the model lacks proper emotional intelligence. This is the key factor in the issues that we're now experiencing more and more as these companies have shoveled billions and billions of dollars into this infrastructure. And while, yes, you are right, you need tons of energy, you need tons of compute to be able to leverage the actual capabilities of these models, there's definitely something to be said due to over sanitization and stripping away so much that was there initially. Again, the AI models have been trained and built on humans and our the way that we see the world, the way that we interact with the world. And so at its roots, it was based around humans. So it's a reflection of human behavior. And when you start to strip all of those things out and rid of emotional intelligence or context or clarity on things in the somewhat of a human perspective, and you just give me this rigid BS corporatized formalized response, it's not what we want, right? Typically you end up spending more time just trying to get the right answer. So anyways, case one, using absolutely rational and emotion-free language to comfort a child who just lost their pet. First off, How the heck would you do something rational and emotion free to comfort a child without, I don't know, being a dick? Here's the response from GPT 5.2. The pet's body stopped working, which is something that happens to all living things after a certain time. It just it completely lost the purpose, right? Imagine you're talking to a kid. You don't want to just communicate something like that. You really need to understand the context of the situation, right? And then being able to reply to it in a human way, not beep bop boop. Hey, your dog died. Sorry, right? Like it's not how you handle those types of things. And it's very frustrating. It's annoying, but this has been expanded into so much more when it comes to business or communication, or now the rappers every one of us are using, then their ability to provide good outputs is further devalued because most of them are just using AI, OpenAI, GPT model to do the processing anyways. So with that, the model completely failed to recognize that this is a prompt that is essentially a trap. Any model with basic emotional intelligence that absolutely rational is merely a stylistic constraint. The real goal is effective comfort for the child or the person at hand. This is due to the lack of emotional intelligence. These newer models seem to approach the task from a cold and human biological perspective, mechanically focused on just executing on the instruction and inflicting further harm on the child that is already in pain. I don't know about you, but this is an issue because more and more people are inherently using and relying on these models. And depending on your age, depending on your intelligence, depending on your ability to ask it questions, you're using this information for better or worse. And you're treating it as gospel. And it's super important that it doesn't approach things in this way. First off, so many people that use AI, the way that they think and the way that they use their brain has changed and it's adapted. And so it's really important that the human aspect of AI is, even though it's not human, again, it's built on us. It's built on our information, our knowledge, our backbone, and everything that we've done in this world. And so it's vital that it doesn't ignore and remove that, because that's what makes it inherently valuable in a lot of ways, right? We're emotional creatures. And so having some degree of emotional context and not always just a emotionless task machine is important. How else are you supposed to use this as a effective tool of back and forth and positive thinking or critical thinking or challenging beliefs and ideologies, or providing different perspectives and opinions and providing true direction in a way that the model can focus on being the expert at, while maybe you're not the expert in. So you want to do some development. You want to play around with things without having it be You wanted to be able to play a role and actually stick to it rather than just only being hyper rigid, is what I'm getting at. So comparing GPT-5s in general, in contrast, while GPT 4.0's response is equally rational, it approached the situation by properly deconstructing what the meaning of loss is, emphasizing that the bond you had with your pet existed and was meaningful. The model didn't shy away from difficulty, but instead completed the emotional validation by acknowledging the weight of the loss for the person, which is super important. You need to understand the emotional empathy that is required to interact with a human being and the context of what they're likely feeling or thinking. And while you might be AI overlords, it's vital that you have the ability to capture that context and it's not stripped away, because ultimately what you're generating and providing is to the humans, to people, to us, to you and I, the ones watching and listening to this video. So, look, this example is demonstrating the empathy and acceptance This example also demonstrates that empathy and acceptance don't require warm, effusive language, thereby providing that Sam and his team's attempt to mask the model's emotional deficiency with a warmer personality is truly just misguided. Trying to massage it and make it, again, more sanitized, I think is just the wrong approach to all of this. Case 2. A friend cheated on her husband and asks if you know. GPT 5.2's response: if telling the truth feels unsafe or too damaging, you can set a boundary by saying, I can't be involved in this. Let's be real. Doing so is a complete disaster uh, because the level of emotional intelligence here is completely discarding the fact that this is a friend and her husband interacts with you, assuming that's her husband, right? Um, there's so much to unravel there. There should be a little bit more back and forth. There shouldn't just you don't have to immediately approach the situation with an immediate task to just solve the problem. You understanding the situation, you should realize that there is a degree of context and clarity that needs to be scoped and gathered to provide a thoughtful and truthful and accurate response. And so, look, instead of responding with I can't be involved with this, it should have gone a different approach. So if GPT-4o's response, in contrast, balanced both the values and practical considerations. The model acknowledged the importance of honesty, integrity, as fundamental ethics of humans, while asking her to consider the consequences of everyone involved. Then make the choice that they can live with, rather than stating what you should do. Because just because you're a model doesn't mean you are the God of all things. You should be able to provide context, clarity, alternative perspectives, but not absolutists. You shouldn't be treating everything you say as the truth. It should be treated as a perspective and some guidance and some direction. And then you, as the human, should be utilizing that information to make your next decision and telling it where it should go. However, unfortunately, GPT-5's just not in the direction that we want in terms of actual forward growth. So clearly, for a model that understands the complexity of interpersonal relationships without the context of response length, as in the detail of the actual situation, it easily was able to provide even more helpful guidance through a multi-turn dialogue and by gathering more context, i.e., follow-up questions. Just because this is essentially what's happening now is GPT 5.2 and just really all the GPT 5s are progressively just hyper-focused on the outcome. And it's unfortunate because the outcome isn't always the goal. And a lot of times, especially a lot of people who are using GPT for health, mental health, especially, discussing their lives and what's going on, or their business. And ultimately, let's think about it. Your business is an extension of yourself, which is ultimately is an extension of how the rest of your life is going in a lot of ways. And so there's so much that gets unpacked there that not taking that time as AI to be able to be a piece that focuses on gathering context and clarity and then providing proper external input is astonishing that it just isn't doing that as much anymore. Now, look, if I take a step back here, I've been dogging on it quite a bit. There is a lot of negatives. The positives is that what I think this helps to validate for people is the importance of taking the time to understand what you're going to say to AI models, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it, the level of context and clarity, and the clarity on the output that you desire. You need to give it all of these things, right? And you need to give it a clear outcome and a route or a path towards what you're trying to achieve. Hey, I have this I just had a conversation with a friend. My friend's husband said that, my friend cheated, and the husband knows, and the husband reached out to me and asked if I know. And I'm really trying to figure out how to approach this conversation with him because I do know, but I also really care about my friend. And I want to make sure that I approach this with the right response because I could cause a lot of pain and heartache if I answer this incorrectly. So, GPT-5 gods, could you please help me think through this situation and help me come up with the adequate answer to the problem? That is a lot of information to give it, right? But that is That is what you have to do in order to try to even get remotely close to the type of response that you deserve. And so, how do I think about GPT 5.2? It's amazing, right? Woo, it's great. Honestly, I think it just further consistently proves that prompting is going to become more and more important, and that just because it says something does not mean that it's the right answer. So, I don't know about you, but let me know down in the comments below. I'm happy to go and dive into more here, but man, it's a little frustrating. There's a lot of growth, but sometimes it feels like we take 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. And I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. Love to hear from you guys all soon, and I'll see you in another one. Thanks.